Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. We're going to wait just 1 minute to let others join, and then we'll begin today's discussion. Thank you all for joining us. It's a beautiful day here in North Carolina, so I hope it is where you are too. All right, we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar in partnership with DigiLearn on developing micro-credential quality assurance standards to attract and retain teachers. My name is Erica Vaverka, and I am Director of K-12 here at the Hunt Institute. For those of you unfamiliar with the Hunt Institute, we were founded by four-term North Carolina Governor Jim Hunt and serve as a resource for policymakers on education issues across the education continuum through in-person and virtual convenings, research, and other forms of technical assistance. Before jumping into logistics and turning it over to our moderator, I want to acknowledge that this webinar this webinar is in partnership with DigiLearn. The Hunt Institute would like to thank DigiLearn's founder and CEO and one of our panelists today, Governor Bev Perdue, for her partnership on this series, as well as DigiLearn's Executive Director, Myra Best, for her ongoing support and partnership in putting this series together. We're going to start with a moderated discussion with our panelists and moderator, and then pivot to a Q&A with the audience. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A feature on the bottom of your Zoom screen. We're going to do our best to address them during the discussion, and our friends at DigiLearn have offered to answer any questions we don't get to following this webinar. So all your questions will get answered. Some of those answers might happen during the webinar, some might happen after the fact. Additionally, we're going to record this conversation and in the next couple of days post it to our YouTube channel if you want to share it with friends and colleagues. We also encourage you to join us on Twitter. We'll be live tweeting from our Twitter account at Hunt_Institute. And I'm going to take down the slide. And that is it from me. I'd like to now turn it over to our moderator, Laverne Srinivasan, who serves as Vice President for the National Program and Program Director for Education at the Carnegie Corporation of New York. As always, thank you, Laverne, and I'll turn it over to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Erica. Really appreciate the introduction. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today. Today's conversation serves as the fourth webinar in a series on the power and possibility of micro-credentials in our education system. Today, we will explore how micro-credentials can be a tool for states and districts to attract and retain educators. We will also hear from national experts about why quality assurance standards are necessary to protect the value and transferability of this highly personalized professional development approach. Joining us for today's conversation are Governor Bev Perdue, who served as North Carolina's 73rd and the state's first woman governor. Since leaving office, Governor Perdue has gone on to found DigiLearn, where she is committed to expanding personal learning options for students and educators. Babette Ray serves as a program advisor within the Office of Educator Effectiveness and Licensure in the Arkansas Division of Elementary and Secondary Education. Dr. Thomas Hodges, Dean and Professor of Mathematics Education at the University of South Carolina. And finally, Dr. Ann Nutter-Kaufman, Manager in the Teacher Quality Department at the National Education Association. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, we'll jump right in. And again, for our audience, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A. So let's dive into the conversation. I'm going to start with Governor Perdue. Governor Perdue, you are a former educator and a longtime advocate for students and teachers alike. Since your time in office, you've continued to be a national influence in education, in part by founding DigiLearn, a nonprofit that investigates how technology can be used to power education at all levels. What inspires you to take this approach, and why do you believe that micro-credentials have a critical role in educator professional development?
Thank you, Laverne. And again, welcome to all the panelists and Myra, who's somewhere in Netherland. We thank all of you for your work, for your participation. All those who are attending the webinar, the Hunt Institute is fabulous. We are grateful to them for their partnership and their friendship. So why do I do this, Laverne? I do it for the same reason all these folks here do it. I do it because I believe in education, and I believe that really well-trained, personalized learning for teachers is critical for the future of this country. As the chair of the National Governing Board on Standards, you know that we've seen some abysmal scores from our kids over the last 10 years, I would say 50 years. And so we've got a lot of work to do, and we've got a lot of ground to make up. And it's only with leadership like this, with innovation and inspiration, we can make that happen. And Myra, thank you for your leadership. We know, and the research has established, that the single most important factor in the outcome of a kid's life is a well-prepared, highly skilled, caring teacher. But we've seen a basic decline in the scores for children. And I was really saddened to see that there was less than 10% of American children who said they really like to read for fun or pleasure. They don't read unless they're assigned a book. That's not good for the country and not good for our schools. I know a lot of people will say, oh, the pandemic did this, but we all know that the scores were declining long before the pandemic. So we see states now on top of all that, and districts and schools grapple with a growing teacher shortage and challenges with recruiting and retraining the teachers who are in the workforce today. This should give us cause for pause. It did me. And I asked the simple question, does America still believe in education? I think that answer is yes, we do. And we must begin to invest in developing, supporting, and retaining highly effective teachers in an educational workforce, because that's the foundation of American science. And the business community in the country has so much vested in the outcome of these students. So education micro-credentials, Laverne, to me, is one way, and it offers a promising strategy, a solution perhaps, for helping every kid to be guaranteed a highly performing, highly effective teacher, because it's a competency-based program where teachers have to demonstrate their skills that they learned in the classroom. Now, we know that that's a major shift away from the traditional seat time or the CEU, and there's been a lot of resistance across the country to this change or innovation in education. Micro-credentials were a natural fit for DigiLearn to explore, and we thank Carnegie for the help in doing that. I believe that if you can use technology as a tool, personalized learning can be really effective for our students as well as our teachers. And so we've gone beyond just the student into the education workforce. I think with the knowledge now, we are beginning to learn about the role of artificial intelligence and other machine learning kind of opportunities. We know that learning and personalized learning can be enhanced and perhaps furthered faster and quicker than we ever thought possible. Micro-credentials offer the teachers across the country this kind of support. They can individualize their teachers' needs, and they can work on their own time. What better solution is that? Perhaps we can admit that the days of the superintendent or the principal, no offense to you who are superintendents or principals, saying, well, we're going to have John Doe come in because I met him on a boat ride in Mississippi, and he's going to offer us these wonderful credentials for our teachers. Those days are over, and micro-credentials pave the way for that personalized learning. We formed the micro-credential partnership of the states, you out there, with THI International after completing the state level work for micro-credentials. The North Carolina work informed us that with national research by New America, there are key issues that we have to apply if states want to be participatory in this kind of innovation. There has to be a consistent definition for what micro-credentials mean. That's just bottom line basic. And consistent quality assurance standards for the micro-credentials. That's another essential. And data, data about the impact of micro-credentials on the teacher's practice and student learning. Now, we know that there's not a genie in Washington who can say, abracadabra, make it happen. We understand that states across America are in charge of their own educational philosophy and destiny and the things they deem important. I support that, and I know you all do, but we're just laying it out there. If this partnership of the states can develop the quality assurance standards, have the data and a consistent definition, and then make them portable and highly acknowledged across the country and let the states pick them or choose them or leave them alone, then that's as good as we can get with this. Wyoming, South Carolina, thank you, Dr. Hodges, and Arkansas also use micro-credentials in different ways, and they've joined the partners in North Carolina. Teachers and others are really taking advantage of the micro-credentials. They have no way of knowing that the micro-credential they're taking has any quality. They have no way to prove to themselves that the learning they are getting at their own time, at their own expense, can improve their practice in teaching and ultimately improve student achievement. Nor, this is the real gimme for me, are they recognized for doing the work, and they're not rewarded for it. So that's a lot of things that states have to address and change. Teachers need these personalized options, I believe it. And digital learning is the way, in my opinion, to personalize teacher learning, which is why we've seen this rise in the interest, paralleling what the business community has done in the training of their employees consistently. We completed phase 1 of our work, and it was really marvelous to see the outcomes. It includes the development of the standards. And again, I thank you all for participating in that work. And that's why we're here today, to talk about them. And additional to the standards for quality assurance, the Micro-Credentials Partnership of the State is working to identify and develop policies to build a national database that shows where micro-credentials can make a difference. And my ultimate hope, before I retire the baton to one of you all, is that we've done such good work that state leaders across the country in this very troubled educational environment we find ourselves in are willing to look at this new concept and are looking to accept that change is necessary for the schools across America. Thanks, DigiLearn.
Thank you so much, Governor Perdue. It's been such a pleasure to support your work in this area. And I am just so, I don't know that you'll ever really end up passing the baton, Governor Perdue, but I am such a champion of the work you're doing and have been doing. And it's just so important. We've done a lot to think about how to change and improve the way we provide learning experiences for young people. We need to do that for our teachers as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Dr. Nutter-Kaufman, coming to you next. The Micro-Credentials Partnership of States, led by DigiLearn, is working to address the challenges states have when implementing micro-credentials, as Governor Perdue was saying. Establishing consistent quality assurance standards for micro-credentials will be a valuable resource for educators, schools, districts, and states to use as they incorporate micro-credentials into their systems of professional learning and licensure. Dr. Kaufman, will you speak about the importance of the quality assurance standards and which factors should be considered when assessing micro-credentials for quality?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice that you all could join us this afternoon. So there are some that I see in our participant list who have been involved in this space for quite a while. And we have all heard this idiom around, it's the wild, wild west. You know, ever since we've started having micro-credentials in the education space, it has been, quite frankly, really difficult to have a conversation about what quality looks like across various states, districts, whatever it may be. There are those organizations that have banded together to try to think about what that could look like. But I will say that the partnership quality standards that we're talking about that DigiLearn helped move forward are really the first time we've had states come together to talk about this. And the importance of that is, of course, if you're in a state, as we go from state to state, you want to know what other states are doing and how you can borrow, and as the best teachers do, steal the best practices that can be used in your state as well. So when we talk about what do we really want to be like the factors involved in this, number one, we need to be sure that we're having consistency in the quality of what we're evaluating, right? That it's not apples and oranges being compared, but really apples and apples. Because right now it's apples and bananas, or, you know, it just really varies across different organizations, different districts, as to who's creating micro-credentials, what they look like, et cetera. So I think, you know, a couple of key points. We want to make sure that micro-credentials are research-based. We don't want just, you know, random X person creating something willy-nilly that isn't based in reality and isn't based on good research that we know puts forward what quality in the particular micro-credential topic we're talking about. So I think one of the first things we really need to do is make sure that they're research-based. And then another piece would be that they're co-developed by both those that are experts in the content that are being that is being written about, but also those that will ultimately be using or taking said micro-credentials. So that could be teachers, that could be other education support professionals, that could be counselors, that could be a number of different folks that in our space are involved in schools in some way. But you know, really need to have both pieces. And a lot of our teachers, quite frankly, are content experts and have been writing about content experts, you know, about the content and what happens with it. So really making sure that we have that, not only that great content as a part of it, but that we have the user involved in the writing. This is an important quality indicator. Making sure that we have evidence of the competency itself, and that we are, sorry, my son was just calling me, now I'm off track, that we are not just regurgitating information, but that we are having an application of that information, right? So we want to make sure that those good reflection questions, that they can actually show that they have proven that particular, the competency that they understand this. They're not regurgitating facts, but they're actually showing us what that looks like within their context, within their in their spaces. So that process, the last thing I'll talk about is that process for feedback and revision as part of the micro-credential itself. I have mom texted to me 10 times, 1 second. Sorry. Making sure that the micro-credentials that are being utilized within the states, that there is a process in the micro-credential to review and for revision and feedback, so that if I'm submitting a micro-credential, I'm going to get feedback from whoever the issuer may be, and also the opportunity to resubmit for revision, because we know that not everybody's going to get something right the first time, that learning often occurs when you actually get something wrong and then can revise and rethink. So I think that's something else that really needs to be considered as a factor and involved in this. And what does that evaluation process look like involved in micro-credentials, and how the individual can actually get feedback? I could go on and on about this topic, but given that my kid just texted me 10 times, I should probably stop right there for a sec. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Kaufman. We know life is happening in real time, so we appreciate it 100%. Don't go take care of what you need to take care of, and appreciate your reflections. Let me turn to Ms. Babette Ray next. Ms. Ray, as a representative of a state education agency, what considerations and questions do you think states should be thinking about or asking out loud as they look to implement micro-credentials as more flexible, personalized learning opportunities?
Well, there's actually a really extensive list of questions and considerations. But in thinking about kind of the top three, from my vantage point, one of the first considerations is how will we communicate our vision for micro-credentials with various stakeholders? It's important to develop a good communication plan When I started in this position, I quickly learned that people had very different interpretations of what a micro-credential is and what it is not. So the first step in our communication plan was to introduce micro-credentials to teachers, administrators, and district leaders so everyone had a common understanding and how it would benefit them from their particular role within education. And then next, I think state agencies should really consider how micro-credentials will fit into their existing system of professional development. In most states, professional development is measured in hours or CEUs. We don't have a lot of states measuring the number of competencies or skills an educator earns each year. So that is a big shift. And I think aligning micro-credentials with the existing system is an important consideration. Change is hard, and most educators have spent their entire careers attending workshops or taking courses. So we don't want to send the message that we're eliminating or trying to eliminate all other forms of professional learning, or that micro-credentials are one more serving on an already very full plate. I think about those old Chinette commercials where the paper plate, it wasn't Chinette. And so I think a lot of teachers have reached that point with professional development. So at least in Arkansas, we're trying to develop micro-credentials that align with our existing initiatives so that teachers see the value in the traditional professional development, but then micro-credentials are a way to take that new learning and implement it into the classroom. So that it becomes part of their professional practice. And then I think the final of my big three questions would be, what will motivate teachers to earn micro-credentials, especially if other forms of professional development are still an option? Some teachers really enjoy showing up. I sign my name on the list, saying the attendance list, and then I leave at the end of the day. So what is it that's going to be appealing to teachers about micro-credentials? When we began the work with DigiLearn, THI facilitated focus group discussions with teachers and administrators. And in those conversations, we learned that while stipends might be an incentive for some teachers, the gift of time is extremely motivating. Many of the educators agreed that being able to get a pass on a traditional PD day that the district provided would be a very shiny carrot for them to earn a micro-credential. So I think, rethinking what's important to people and, how we can support the things that they view as important and relevant to their practice. So those would be my top three.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there are many, but thank you for sharing your top three. And now, even though you've shared your top three, I'm going to ask you for one more bit of advice. Are there opportunities for states to learn from what other states have done in this space?
Absolutely. As Dr. Kaufman said, we love to know what other states are doing to steal their best ideas. I like to say, I'm not going to work long enough to make all the mistakes myself. So I need to reach out to others and, find out what can I do to be proactive. And I think especially when we start looking at licensure and how states are using micro-credentials to support initial licensure or licensure renewal. Arkansas has visited with lots of states because we offer teachers, if they score within a certain range on the content praxis, to use a micro-credential to supplement that score as one of their initial licensure requirements. So we are, starting to look at that. But again, it goes back to these quality assurance standards. And are they going to be quality? Are they going to be rigorous so that other states will be comfortable in recognizing them?
Terrific. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Dr. Hodges, over to you now. The use of micro-credentials, as you know, continues to grow across the nation. As the dean of a school of education, which is charged with developing teachers, what role do you see for micro-credentials with educator licensure and preparation programs? And how are you addressing the use of micro-credentials as a leader of teacher education preparation programs?
Thanks, Laverne. I want to start by just giving you some numbers about where we are today, and then talk a little bit about how we got here. So right now we have 3,244 pursuers. That's 742 unique micro-credentials. Well, not unique, 742 micro-credentials that are currently being enrolled in right now. 1,838 micro-credentials have been earned. We have 99 trained developers. Those are largely classroom teachers and experts in the field, 39 trained assessors, 340 unique micro-credentials on the platform that are comprised into 34 different stacks. We have partnerships with 5 school districts, 7 different organizations, and have hosted 3 Explore sessions that included 15 different school districts that were involved in that. So it's been quite a robust enterprise over the last few years that we've engaged in around micro-credentials. But it was born very pragmatically for us. So we launched an alternative preparation program in the College of Education in 2020. And when we did, we recognized that career changers are coming with an enormous amount of expertise, some of it professional, some of it sort of life expertise that they bring to the table. And we recognize that if we're going to alternatively prepare teachers, some of which who have been a teacher's assistant in a paraprofessional role for 15 or 20 years, others maybe a wildlife biologist with the Park Service. But from all of these different fields, we couldn't treat them all as if they needed the exact same preparation pathway and exact same sets of experiences, because they were bringing with them different kinds of competencies. And to be able to recognize that, we needed a hyper-personalized approach to educator preparation. So one of the questions that's in the Q&A is, does this replace educator preparation? I'd say decidedly not. What it does really well is it complements educator preparation and it grounds it in classroom practice. So we already know that good quality educator preparation involves an enormous amount of classroom practice. What micro-credentials allow individuals to do is to build and demonstrate the expertise that they're developing while engaging in those clinical experiences. So for us, it really originated out of a desire to be hyper-personalized. I think if I wear a broader higher education hat and answer the question, I think a lot of people are questioning right now the value proposition of higher education and 4-year degrees and even graduate degrees as being somewhat of a higher education being somewhat of a static enterprise. And I think what we see in our approach to micro-credentials, it allows us to be anything but a static enterprise. It allows us to be, again, hyper-personalized in the approaches that we take, responsive to the needs of districts, responsive to the needs of teachers. And then from a quality assurance standpoint, we've been very fortunate to partner with the Center for Teaching Quality, now Mira Education, in launching our micro-credentials work such that we could leverage the best of what we know, but the quality assurance process allows us to develop some of those common definitions and a common understanding of what really good micro-credentials look and feel like. We've also already undertaken a revisioning exercise around micro-credentials based on feedback. So it's not a build it and then it's done. It's a constant living thing that gets evolved over time, much like any good curriculum does. So all that to say, our engagement in educator preparation is about being responsive to not only the candidates that we work with, but the unique needs of districts and the unique needs of educators as they engage in practice, both at a pre-service and in-service level.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Hodges. So I just want to ask one last question of all of you. And if you can provide some brief answers, I'm also going to remind folks in the audience to submit their questions in the Q&A. And we'll try to get to as many of those as we can as well. The question I have for all of you for a quick sort of lightning round of responses is, what are some of the challenges or barriers that educational institutions or organizations or even states may face in adopting and or implementing micro-credentials? Are there any best practices or examples of success that you can point to effectively circumnavigate these challenges? And if you would like, you can also build in how will the micro-credentials quality assurance standards help with this? So why don't I go actually first to Governor Perdue. Governor Perdue, I think you're on mute.
My dog was barking, so I didn't think y'all wanted to hear that. Yeah, this is from my perspective, and I've been out of education a long time in the classroom. And so perhaps I'm a bit cynical. I continue to believe that the money drives educational decisions. And so whatever the policy is and whatever the debate is in the legislative bodies, that's what gets funded. And it's hard to fund anything outside that paradigm. So I think that these states have come together and figured out a way to do something uniquely innovative like micro-credentials, and to understand that there needs to be data to back them up, and quality assurance standards is incredibly important to the whole paradigm of education. I believe that innovation and change can happen not just from the top down where the money is, but also from you all in the field. And I salute you for your comments today and for the work you're doing. And so to move beyond the polarization or the siloed approach of one size fits all, the way you're attempting to integrate the micro-credentials into your state systems and allow teachers an opportunity, if they choose, to enhance their teacher personalized learning through licensure programs or renewal policies that focus not just on compliance with the standards, but also with a way to foster their own personal growth. That's a huge shift from when I was a teacher. So you see on this panel, a policy leader, a state agency rep, a dean from a school of education, and a micro-credentials developer who represent most of the teachers across the country. Think of that. Y'all are speaking for the army that we all depend on to educate our kids. You have a critical role in developing this, and RTI has been providing us with some data. So I think this team that we're about is going to be a way to actually innovate and change education. So I think that's a real positive for me. That's what keeps the lights on at DigiLearn, because I really do believe that change is happening as you all do the work. In answer to your last questions about quality assurance with micro-credentials, I don't believe anything should be developed that doesn't have quality assurance, Laverne. I just strongly believe in the data. And I think this team of the partnership believes in the data, and the incorporation of micro-credentials as a part of the teacher learning system will give states a way to use their resources perhaps differently to make sure that the micro-credentials are not just innovative, but also very effective. And I think the idea that we're approaching it from a state gets to choose level. Nobody's trying to force this down anybody's throat, but it's something that celebrated leaders like you all can stand up and talk about and perhaps be the impetus for change across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Perdue. Why don't I just go right back around in order? Dr. Kaufman?
Absolutely. Thank you for your patience earlier. I have an impatient 9-year-old who has to text me all that time, evidently. Anyway, so challenges, I mean, let me count the ways, right? As any new initiative that happens, there's always going to be some misunderstandings of what exactly we're even talking about. This is a vastly different way of doing professional learning. And I think the number one challenge, quite frankly, has been the education of potential users about what it really is and what it means, right? So micro-credential, brings images of our of our credentials, like those big things we have to do. It requires a lot of explanation about what's required and how it's different from what they're used to. And we've made some progress with that in some places. Of course, currency to the attached micro-credential always helps with that, because you have someone who is enticed then to learn. If I'm not enticed to learn and I'm already one of our stressed out educators, I'm unlikely to take on something new unless you're a nerd like I am, who just does that kind of thing sometimes because you think it's cool, right? In places like Wheaton Warrenville, Illinois, it's actually been added to their teacher contract as one of their professional learning professional learning possibilities that then adds to their salary, right? So that's an example of, well, they have an incentive, so they're more likely to try to figure out what this thing is and then try to move forward. So I think that, just to keep it short, I can talk about other things, but I think that really understanding truly what a micro-credential is, from policymakers to our educators, has really been the #1 challenge.
Thank you, Dr. Kaufman. Babette Ray, how would you respond to that question? You gave us some good thoughts, by the way, tying into Dr. Kaufman's point about communications and really making sure that people understand what it is, how it's a benefit to them. What would you add about addressing challenges and barriers?
Well, I think that one of the challenges for us is we want to make sure that, we're embarking on this new form of professional learning, but is it really going to impact a teacher's practice? Will the students of a teacher who earns micro-credentials perform better academically than students who have teachers who do traditional PD? And I think until we come up with a way to measure that and collect some data, then it's all really just anecdotal, feel good about micro-credentials. But so we really need to come up with a way to collect that data. That's one reason that I'm really interested in the work we're doing, because that's the vision, is that we will be able to do that at the end of the partnership, or maybe the partnership won't end. We'll just keep thinking of things and go into perpetuity. So I think that's one. And then having quality micro-credentials. We want the experience to be really good for the educator. Dr. Kaufman alluded to this. We have asked educators to pilot our micro-credentials before we offer them wholesale. So that's really important. We don't want it to be something that's frustrating to teachers, trying to find that sweet spot of it's rigorous enough, but it's not overwhelming, where teachers throw their hands up and say it's just too much. So there's just a lot. And again, I think a lot of it goes back to channels of communication. Everyone needs to be talking together as we look forward.
Terrific. Thank you for that advice. And Dr. Hodges, what would you add?
Yeah, I briefly mentioned that, we had the good fortune of working with Mira Education, formerly Center for Teaching Quality, to be able to really, they've been our quality assurance partner along the way, and to really help us as an institution understand what micro-credentials can and should be, and what their look and feel, and sort of the uniformity across, and the process for quality assurance along the way. So having that partner with a lot of expertise and history there, and then combining it with both institutional and then classroom teacher expertise, as well as the infrastructure of the institution, was a very fruitful marriage for us in being able to launch the platform along the way. So I think bringing in a number of individuals, a number of different stakeholders with different kinds of expertise and different kinds of experiences afforded us to develop something that was pretty powerful. And could have quick uptake, because there wasn't any one single entity that was sort of controlling the enterprise, which again, I think is the benefit of having this broad-based inclusion of different stakeholders across the system, helping define what that quality process really looks like.
Thank you, Dr. Hodges. Now, I'm going to start with one of the questions that's come to me through the Q&A. So shifting gears a little bit to focus on resources, which you've touched on a little bit already, but let's come back to it, because I think there's some interest in understanding your insights on this question. As the popularity of these programs increase, what should states and policymakers be thinking about to ensure that teachers have the resources necessary to take advantage of these opportunities? Are there programs or funding streams available to states or educators interested in these opportunities? Why don't I start with you, Dr. Kaufman?
Teachers, okay, so yes and no, which is always the best kind of answer, isn't it? So at the federal level, there really isn't targeted dollars available for micro-credentials by themselves. We know that there are, if districts are interested in being a part of micro-credentials, that the Title II dollars can definitely be used as part of a micro-credential program. And of course, if you're looking to embed them within higher education or teacher residency kinds of programs, some of the money can be used that way. So at the federal level, those would be my best recommendations. NEA's micro-credentials are actually free to our 3 million members. If you are not capable of becoming a member in NEA, we also have a community ally membership, which is, just your community ally. And then the micro-credentials become free as well. Non-members are charged $75, and all of that money goes to the cost of assessing the micro-credentials. So, I think there's ways, quite frankly, to make them either low cost or no cost to educators to be able to be, to take the micro-credentials and expand the professional learning pieces here.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that information for our viewers. I'm going to ask Governor Perdue this question as well, and then I'm going to switch to another question for others. Governor Perdue?
Vern, I think it's a really good question. I was interested that in the currency, it's not just money, as I tend to think about it, but you also said that, I think, Dr. Ray, that time was a wonderful way to enhance teachers' participation. So I think that could be done at a state level fairly easily. And obviously the licensing agency would have to participate. Laverne, I would believe if a group of us went to the Department of Ed in Washington and talked to the secretary who understands the need for better teacher professional learning, we could figure out a way out of all the federal dollars that have been allocated for education to carve out something that would at least the first year as a model. If we had the QA, we've got to have the quality and the data, but I think it would be doable to get the help of the federal government. And I quite frankly think that educational leadership at the state level are really interested after these latest scores in reading and math and trying anything they can think of to enhance the quality of teacher preparation, because that's been the easy scapegoat and the blame. Well, what happened? The teachers weren't there. And we all know that's totally inaccurate. So I think if we had the opportunity to reward financially teachers and use the leadership of the state's educational committees, things really might change. But the bottom line, first of all of us have to have a common definition of what micro-credentials are and how we pay for them and how we qualify them with data.
Thank you, Governor Perdue. One of the, I think I'm going to go with this question coming in. Is there any research? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Hodges, would you like to add?
Yeah, just real quick. I just wanted to say that, we don't believe that teachers should have to pay for their personalized professional learning. We made a strategic decision early on that we weren't going to allow individual educators to even go on the platform and purchase. We want to build capacity in schools and districts to be able to operate at scale and for teachers to be able to work together on micro-credentials and think and learn and grow together. So it's about capacity building while you're engaging in personalized professional learning. And for us, I think when you're thinking about the economy of it, there's an economy of scale and working at a system level that affords some unique opportunities rather than sort of what might be a one-off where I can just go in and put credit card information in and earn a micro-credential. How does that maybe it helps me, but how does that build capacity inside the building or across the system in any sort of profound way? So we know the districts have used Title II funds, ESSER funds, or just existing professional development funds. There's certain school districts that maybe they want to focus on improving math instruction, so they want to open up a range of micro-credentials around mathematics, or maybe it's literacy or coaching or so forth. So again, a district can make a strategic decision about their priorities and open up portions of micro-credentials to their teachers, such that there's that capacity building exercise in there, and again, not just one-offs.
Right.
I really appreciate that, Dr. Hodges, and the give and take of districts and states really understanding at that personal individual level, what is it that teachers want to learn? What do they want to focus on in addition to what the priorities are? I think it's a wonderful two-way street around that. And given the need to focus on retention as well, I think really attending to and supporting teachers in their professional learning journey in a more individualized way could be very helpful to that. Dr. Kaufman, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's an important point to put out there, is that, of course, any teacher can go in and take a micro-credential, but that we know that research shows us that we are going to actually impact the practices of educators and ultimately impact our student learning by educators working together, right? So if they're working together, then they are more likely to change their own practices and move forward. So, I just want to put that out there. Yes, we can definitely do this independently, but when educators are doing them in professional learning communities or in other kinds of learning situations, we're more likely to ultimately impact student learning. So I just want to put that out there. Yes, great way to get the license check. Like every teacher has to do that. You have to do so many CEUs or whatever it may be. That's just fundamentally, unfortunately, how our system works right now. But that we know that if we're actually going to impact change, that these have to be done in collaboration with others.
Perfect. Babette, is there anything you'd like to add before I go to the next question?
Well, I'll just say that in Arkansas, we have been committed to offering our micro-credentials at no cost to educators. So again, it's a matter of, and I hesitate to say this, but education is big business, and there are so many vendors selling districts professional development, and it's not to say anything about the quality, but there is a cost associated with that. So for districts who do need an alternative to expensive professional development, ours are at no cost. So a district could have a vertical team come in and do a micro-credential, and like Dr. Kaufman was saying, collaborate around that in PLC time or vertical team meetings. Mm-hmm. And again, we're trying to connect the micro-credentials that we roll out to our existing initiatives. So if a school is focused on PBIS, then we have some micro-credentials that would on creating a consistent learning environment in your classroom that align nicely with those other strategies. So, I think that teachers will start to see the benefits, and really we want it to be enjoyable work. So that would be my 2 cents.
Appreciate it. There are a couple of there are several questions, but there's one that somewhat relates to one of the answers that we just explored. Is there any research out there that can show a relationship between obtaining micro-credentials by the teacher and the teacher's effectiveness on metrics such as student growth? Governor Perdue, do you want to step in there?
If there is data out there, and I'm sure there is, I would feel like I don't know the answer.
Okay.
I'm hopeful that it ties in positively.
When we started this work, we did some collaborating with Kentucky Valley Educational Co-op. Robert Burns and Jennifer Carroll did a lot of initial work with micro-credentials, and they had started tracking teachers' NWEA MAP scores
Mhm.
that were earning micro-credentials with those that weren't, and they were seeing some positive correlation. So, but it was very early, so I don't know what they've done with that since.
North Carolina doesn't have that data.
Nobody
Dr.
does.
Kaufman? No, okay.
Like, it's just not, because it's such a newer professional learning mechanism, the data just isn't out there. And even the work that Robert was doing in Kentucky and Jennifer, the N was relatively small.
Yeah.
So, I think honestly, these quality indicators go a long way in trying to standardize what these micro-credentials look like in different places, which then allows us to begin to make the kind of, and do the kind of research you're talking about. But because they're so different in different places, it's been very hard to do that kind of study.
Vern, that's where the standards, the need for the standards come from. That's why the work of the partnership has been so essential to the development of the definitions. And I think the final step would be to make it portable. So if I move to West Virginia or Kentucky or South Carolina, I can take my training with me and it doesn't have to be licensed through the state. It's really important work. You all have been incredible partners.
No, that's fantastic. All right, I have one last question because I know our time is getting limited. So I'm going to go to this one. How do you get stakeholders to buy into the credential to increase its validity? For example, if our institution developed a workplace communications credential, how is my credential valued over another one? Who would like to? Dr. Kaufman.
Yeah, so there was another question early on as well, is about, so can any organization just go and start making micro-credentials, and what does that look like? What we have started doing is trying to partner with third-party content validators. So we have worked in partnership with Digital Promise since the beginning, which many of you are aware of, and I saw Kristen as one of the participants. But really thinking about, this is what we believe as what a quality micro-credential contains, right? These are the pieces, and I think the partnership standards or the quality assurance standards will help with this. And then looking to third-party validation of, for example, we have a stack on computer science, and we worked with Code Virginia. We have a stack on family and community partnerships, and we worked with NAFSCI, I always forget what the acronym stands for, National Association of Family and Community Folks. I'm so sorry, NAFSCI, if someone's on here, but there's different organizations. We worked with the Library of Congress on a stack on teaching with primary sources, so that we believe that in working with Digital Promise, we have already really gotten that the concept of the micro-credential down and what the quality looks like, and then looking for that third-party validation for content.
Who else would like to weigh in on that question? Dr. Hodges?
Yeah, I will just briefly, I firmly believe in the power and professionalization of educators, and educators are the ones who should be designing what professional learning looks like. I mean, in any profession, it defines for itself what good quality looks like, and what expertise looks like. I mean, that's true across any profession. But for some reason in education, we've tended to trend away from that and allowed others to dictate to teachers what good quality teaching looks like. And so I would foreground the educator. And also back on the previous question too, I think there's a related answer there too about student achievement. Certainly we want students to, we want to know if the things that teachers are engaging in are leading to higher levels of student achievement. But I think there's also space in there to be unapologetically focused on the educator and about their own professional learning, because we know that a confident, well-prepared, supported educator is one that's going to stay in the classroom, and having educators stay in the classroom who are constantly engaged in learning is certainly going to lead to higher levels of student achievement than a teacher who doesn't have those opportunities and is leaving long before retirement. So I think, I think that there's space in our worlds to really think strategically about the needs of educators independently, and also in recognizing that the expertise is already in the room.
So it goes back, Laverne, to a unified definition of what micro-credentials are, and then to develop the QA standards around what we expect of them, and to bring teachers into the decision-making, and then pay them for their work, and then make them enjoy it, I guess, Thomas, is what you're saying. So it's a big, huge issue, but it can change education. Thank you all for doing this afternoon.
Terrific. Well, let me just give about that. Do you have any last words you would like to add? Because I think we're close to transitioning. So
I would just say I'm excited about the next phase of the work, which is developing the rubric to use the standards to evaluate micro-credentials. I think that's going to be critical and will answer some of the questions that were asked today.
absolutely. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you. I do have to do one thing. National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement. They're our grantee as well. So I had to say that.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. They are amazing. And I, off the top of my head, of course, messed it up. So thank you.
So many acronyms we have, so many acronyms, no worries. I just want to thank all of you for taking the time. This is such an important area. We, as we've all said in many different ways, we really need to invest in our teachers and invest in this profession. And really, we've done a lot to try to think more about personalizing learning for students. And I think that it is obviously, as we all know, high time to do that, to support teachers as well, to give them opportunities to grow and develop, and to support their ability to do that both individually and collectively in the most professional ways we can. And to the points that came up about validity, transferability, quality, having the quality standards, which is what DigiLearn has been focused on leading an effort around, is going to be the gateway that helps us address some of those challenges and barriers that we talked about today. So I want to thank you again, Governor Perdue, for your work. Thank you to you, Ms. Ray, to you, Dr. Hodges, and to you, Dr. Kaufman, for all that you are doing in terms of investing in this incredible opportunity for us to attract and retain the very best teachers for our students. I will turn it back to Erica.
Great. Thank you so much, Laverne. I'd like to echo that thanks to you, Laverne, for moderating, as well as to our panelists and to Governor Perdue and Myra Best for your partnership with DigiLearn. It was an incredibly important conversation today. And we deeply appreciate you all making time out of your schedule to join us for today's conversation. Before closing out, I want to turn everyone to our upcoming K-12 webinars. Our next conversation takes place tomorrow with the U.S. Department of Education, and we'll explore how the federal budget can be leveraged by states to better support student learning. We should be dropping a link to register if you haven't already into the chat. And then we have one more upcoming, great, one more slide. We also encourage you to join us for our other upcoming K-12 webinars listed on the screen. You can register for these discussions by going to our website, which we will also post in the chat. So with that, thank you all again for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.